My parents called me a failure my entire life. For 26 years, I was the invisible daughter. The disappointment. The failure. Every rejection slip I hid under my bed, every dream they crushed, I saved it all. And then one night, I wrote a novel about a girl they would never see. It became the biggest book of the year. And when I walked through their front door, I wasn't holding a report card anymore. I was holding the truth. My name is Jessica, and this is my story. I sat alone in the dark of my small apartment, the only light coming from the pale blue glow of my laptop screen. I was 26 years old, but in this moment, I felt like a frightened child again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. I was about to do something I had dreamed of for years. I was about to tell my story. For as long as I could remember, my parents, Margaret and Robert, had called me a failure. The word was like a splinter under my skin, buried deep, always hurting. It started with little things. When I was 8, I brought home a report card with an A- in math. My father, a successful accountant who saw the world only in columns of profit and loss, had stared at the paper as if it were covered in mud. An A-, Jessica? Do you know what that is? It is the first step on a road to mediocrity. It is not good enough. My mother had just sighed, a long, tired sound that was somehow worse than the yelling. She looked at me with disappointment, her eyes already looking past me, as if I were already gone. I remembered that day so clearly. I had been so proud of that A-. Math was hard for me, harder than it seemed to be for other kids. I had stayed up late studying, had asked my teacher for extra help, had worked and worked until the numbers finally started to make sense. I had thought my parents would be proud of my effort, but I learned a painful lesson that day. Effort didn't matter. Only perfection mattered, only being the best mattered, and if you weren't the best, you were a failure. In elementary school, I loved to draw. I would spend hours at the kitchen table, creating worlds with crayons and construction paper. My kindergarten teacher had even hung one of my pictures on the classroom wall. I had brought my parents to see it. My father had glanced at it for half a second before his phone rang, and he walked away to take the call. My mother had smiled a tight smile and said, "That's nice, dear. Now let's go, your father is busy." I had looked at my picture on the wall, a bright rainbow over a field of green, and felt like it didn't matter at all. There was a particular memory that haunted me more than others. I was in 2nd grade, and I had drawn a picture of my family. It showed my father in his leather chair reading the newspaper, my mother in the kitchen cooking, and me sitting at the table with a book. It wasn't a happy picture, looking back, but it was honest. I had worked on it for days, carefully choosing colors, trying to get the details right. When I showed it to my mother, she had looked at it for a long moment and then said, "Is that how you see us?" I hadn't known how to answer. She had handed the picture back without another word. I kept it hidden in my room, but eventually it got thrown away during one of my mother's cleaning sessions. I never asked about it. I knew it didn't matter. In middle school, I discovered writing. I loved to write stories, little tales about magical lands and brave heroes. My English teacher, Mrs. Albright, told me I had a real gift. She gave me a journal as a present at the end of the school year and wrote inside the cover, "To Jessica, a true storyteller. Never stop writing." I kept that journal hidden under my mattress. I wrote in it every night, by flashlight, after my parents thought I was asleep. It was my secret world, the only place where I felt free. Mrs. Albright was the first person who ever made me feel like I mattered. She would stay after class, sometimes to talk about books, about writing, about life. She told me that writers were the most important people in the world because they helped others understand their own hearts. I clung to those words like a lifeline. When I was with her, I felt seen. I felt like I had a future. But middle school was also when the bullying started. There was a group of girls, popular girls, who decided that I was an easy target. They made fun of my clothes, which were never quite fashionable enough. They made fun of my quietness, my bookishness, the way I always had my nose in a story. They called me weird. They called me freak. I would come home crying some days, but my parents never noticed. They were too busy with their own lives, their own concerns. My father was always working. My mother was always cleaning, always organizing, always making sure the house was perfect. There was no room in that perfection for a crying daughter. One day, the girls stole my journal. The one Mrs. Albright had given me. They found it in my locker and they read it out loud in the cafeteria, laughing at my private thoughts, my secret dreams. I sat there, frozen, as my innermost self was paraded around for everyone to see. I wanted to die. I wanted the earth to open up and swallow me whole. After that day, I stopped writing. I stopped doing anything that made me stand out. I tried to become invisible, to fade into the background where no one could hurt me. But the stories never really stopped. They just went underground, living in my head instead of on paper. I would lie in bed at night and tell myself stories, whole novels unfolding in my imagination. It was the only thing that helped me fall asleep. It was the only thing that made the loneliness bearable. High school was when things got really bad. My parents had a plan for my life, a detailed map that led to success as they defined it. I would take all advanced classes. I would get straight A's. I would be captain of an academic team, preferably debate or quiz bowl. I would get into an Ivy League school, study business or law, and then get a high-paying job that would make them proud. There was no room in this plan for art, for writing, for anything that didn't lead directly to money and status. I tried to follow the plan. I really did. I took the advanced classes. I studied until my eyes burned. But my mind kept wandering. I would be solving equations and suddenly think of a character for a story. I would be reading a textbook and imagine a different ending, a better one. My grades were good, but they weren't perfect. I got a B+ in chemistry. I got an A- in history. And every time my father would shake his head and say, "You're not trying hard enough. You're being lazy." The school play tryouts happened in October of my sophomore year. I had been walking past the auditorium when I heard singing from inside. I peeked through the door and saw the drama club rehearsing. They looked so happy, so alive. I stood there for a long time, just watching. The drama teacher, Mr. Harrison, noticed me and came over. "You look interested," he said with a smile. "Auditions for the spring musical are next week. You should come try out." My heart leaped. I had never been in a play before. I had never done anything like that. But the idea of it, of becoming someone else for a little while, of being on a stage under bright lights, it called to me in a way that nothing else ever had. I practiced for that audition like I had never practiced anything before. I chose a monologue from a play I found in the library. It was from a drama about a girl who felt invisible in her own family. I understood that girl completely. I practiced it in my room in front of the mirror, whispering it under my breath at school. I memorized every word, every pause, every gesture. On the day of the auditions, I was terrified but excited. I walked onto the stage, the lights so bright I couldn't see the audience, and I performed. When I finished, there was a moment of silence, and then Mr. Harrison started clapping. "Beautiful," he said, "just beautiful." I got a part. A small one, but a part. I would play a townsperson in the musical, with a few lines and a song in the chorus. It wasn't much, but to me, it was everything. I ran home, bursting through the front door with the news. My father was reading the newspaper in his leather chair. He didn't look up. "A play?" he had said, his voice flat. "How is that going to get you into a good college? How is that going to make you a success?" My mother had been cooking dinner, her back to me. "The applause of strangers," she had said, without turning around. "It is a poor substitute for a real achievement." I felt the joy drain out of me, replaced by a heavy, familiar coldness. I didn't get the part. I quit the play the next day. I told Mr. Harrison it was because of too much homework. He looked at me with sad, knowing eyes. He said, "Jessica, don't let anyone steal your light." But it was too late. The light was already dim. The rest of high school was a blur of trying and failing to be what my parents wanted. I joined the debate team, as they demanded. I hated it. I hated the arguing, the competition, the way everyone tried to tear each other down. I lasted one season. My father called me a quitter. I joined the math club. I was terrible at it. I sat in the back and said nothing. My mother sighed and said, "Maybe you're just not cut out for academic excellence." There was one bright spot. My junior year, I took a creative writing elective. The teacher was a young woman named Miss Delgado who had published a book of poetry. She saw something in me, something that reminded her of herself. She encouraged me to write, really write, not just for assignments but for myself. She gave me books to read, books by women writers, books about finding your voice. She told me that the world needed my stories, that my perspective was unique and valuable. For the first time since Mrs. Albright, I felt seen. I started writing again, secretly at first, then more openly. I wrote poems and short stories. I submitted one to a school literary magazine and it was accepted. I was so proud I thought I might burst. I brought the magazine home and left it on the kitchen counter, open to my story. My mother used it to write a grocery list on. My father never mentioned it. That was the moment something shifted inside me. I realized that I would never get what I needed from them. They were incapable of giving it. The only person who could give me validation, who could make me feel worthy, was myself. It was a hard truth to accept, but accepting it was the first step toward freedom. Then came the college admissions. I had done my research quietly, secretly. I had found a small liberal arts college in another state, a college known for its creative writing program. It wasn't famous. It wasn't Ivy League. But when I read about it, when I looked at the pictures of students sitting on the grass, reading books, discussing ideas, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. I applied without telling them. I used the school counselor's office to print the forms. I asked Mrs. Albright, my old English teacher, to write a recommendation. I asked Miss Delgado too. I poured my heart into the application essay, writing about the power of stories to heal and transform. When the acceptance letter came, I cried. Telling my parents was the hardest thing I had ever done. I waited until after dinner, until they were sitting in the living room. I handed them the letter. My father read it first. His face went through a series of changes, from confusion to disbelief to anger. "What is this?" he demanded. "What kind of school is this? I've never heard of it." "It's a good school," I said quietly. "It has a great writing program." "Writing program," my mother repeated, as if the words tasted bad. "You're going to college to study writing?" "Yes," I said. "It's what I love." My father stood up, the letter crumpling in his hand. "Love," he said. "Love doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't build a future. You are throwing your potential away. You are being lazy and foolish." My mother just looked at me with those sad, disappointed eyes. "We gave you every opportunity," she said quietly. "We sent you to the best schools. We paid for tutors. And this is what you choose: failure." I felt something inside me break. Not snap, but crack, like ice on a frozen lake. I took the crumpled letter from my father's hand, smoothed it out, and said, "I'm going. I'm leaving in August." And I walked out of the room. The summer before college was the longest of my life. My parents barely spoke to me. They moved around me like I was furniture, something to be stepped around and ignored. I got a job at a local bookstore, saving every penny I could. I read constantly, devouring books like they were air and water. I counted the days until I could leave. The bookstore was a haven. It was called the Reading Nook, a small independent shop run by an elderly woman named Allure. Allure was kind and wise, with silver hair and bright eyes that missed nothing. She let me work in the quiet corners of the store, shelving books and helping customers, but mostly just being surrounded by stories. Allure would recommend books to me, slipping them into my hands with a knowing smile. "Read this one," she would say. "I think you'll find something in it." I did find something in those books. I found myself. I found characters who felt like me, who struggled like me, who ultimately found their way. I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could find my way too. The day I left for college, my father was at work. My mother stood in the kitchen, drinking coffee, watching me load my suitcase into the back of Allure's car. Allure had insisted on driving me to the airport. I didn't say goodbye to my mother. My mother didn't say goodbye to me. I just got in the car and drove away, watching the perfect house with the perfect lawn shrink in the rearview mirror until it was gone. Allure looked over at me as we drove. "You're doing the right thing," she said. "The hardest things often are." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I know," I said. "I just wish it didn't hurt so much." "It will hurt for a while," Allure said. "But the hurt will fade. And one day, you'll look back and see that this pain was the price of your freedom. It's a price worth paying." I held those words close in the months that followed. They became a kind of mantra, a reminder that I had chosen myself, that I was worth choosing. College was a revelation. For 4 years, I was free. I lived in a small dorm room with a roommate who became my best friend, a girl named Lily from a small town in Iowa. Lily was majoring in art, and our room was always covered in paintings and sketches and half-finished projects. We stayed up late talking about everything, about our families and our dreams, about the people we wanted to become. Lily understood me in a way no one ever had. She didn't judge me for my pain. She just listened and held my hand and told me I was going to be okay. I took classes in creative writing, in poetry, in literature. I stayed up late talking with friends about books and ideas and the meaning of life. I wrote constantly, filling notebooks with stories and poems and fragments of novels. My professors praised my work. One of them, Professor Williams, told me I had a genuine talent, a rare gift for capturing emotion on the page. Professor Williams was a formidable woman in her 60s, with short gray hair and a no-nonsense manner. She had published several novels and wasn't afraid to tell her students when their work wasn't good enough. But when she praised me, it meant something. It meant she saw potential. It meant I was on the right track. "You have something special," she told me one day after class. "Your voice is authentic. Don't let anyone talk you out of using it." I thought about my parents, about all the years they had tried to talk me out of my voice. I thought about how close I had come to giving up. "I won't," I said. "I promise." But the shadow of my parents' words followed me. Every time I got a good grade, I heard my father's voice saying it wasn't good enough. Every time I finished a story, I saw my mother's sigh. When I graduated with honors, I didn't go to the ceremony. I knew my parents wouldn't come. I sat in my empty dorm room, looking at my diploma, and felt nothing but a dull ache. Lily found me there. She sat down beside me on the floor and put an arm around my shoulders. "You did it," she said. "You actually did it." "I know," I said, "but it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like enough." "It will," Lily said. "Give it time." After graduation, I moved to a small city in the Pacific Northwest. It rained a lot, but I liked the rain. It felt like the world was crying with me. I got a job at a marketing firm, writing copy for websites and advertisements. It paid the bills, but it wasn't my dream. I wrote at night, in the quiet hours when the world was asleep. I wrote short stories and submitted them to literary magazines. I got rejected, over and over again. The rejection slips piled up in a shoebox under my bed. I felt the word failure whispering in my ear, louder now. I called my parents once a month on a Sunday. It was a ritual, a painful one. The conversations were always the same. "How is the job?" my father would ask. "Fine," I would say. "Is it a real job?" he would counter. "With a future." My mother would get on the phone. "Are you still writing those little stories?" she would ask. Her tone was always pitying. "It's a nice hobby, dear, but it's time to be serious. You don't want to be a failure forever." I would hang up and cry. Then I would wipe my tears and open my laptop, and I would write some more. I wrote because I could not write. It was the only thing that made me feel whole. The loneliness was the hardest part. I had friends from college, but they were scattered across the country, building their own lives. Lily had moved to New York to pursue her art. We talked on the phone sometimes, but it wasn't the same. My coworkers were nice, but they weren't friends. I would go home to my small apartment, eat dinner alone, and write until I couldn't keep my eyes open. Some nights, the silence was so loud it hurt. I started going to a coffee shop near my apartment to write. It was a small, cozy place called The Written Word, with mismatched furniture and a cat that slept on the windowsill. The barista, a guy named Sam with kind eyes and a gentle smile, always remembered my order. He would bring me coffee and say, "Writing again tonight?" And I would nod and smile, and for a little while I didn't feel so alone. Sam was a musician. He played guitar in a band that performed at local bars. Sometimes, when the coffee shop was empty, he would play for me, quietly, just for fun. I loved listening to him. His music made me feel things, deep things, things I tried to put into my writing. We became friends, then more than friends. He was the first person since Lily who really saw me, who really understood my need to create. One night after the coffee shop closed, Sam sat down across from me. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure," I said. "Why do you write? I mean, really write. What drives you?" I thought about it. I thought about Mrs. Albright and Miss Delgado and Professor Williams. I thought about all the stories I had told myself as a child, alone in my room, trying to escape. I thought about the girl in the cafeteria, the one whose journal had been stolen, the one who had wanted to disappear. I thought about my parents, about the word failure that had haunted me for so long. "I write because I have to," I said finally. "Because if I didn't, I think I would disappear. Writing is how I prove to myself that I exist, that I matter." Sam reached across the table and took my hand. "You matter," he said. with or without the writing. But I'm glad you write. The world needs your stories. One night, I was scrolling through an online writing forum when I saw a post. It was an advertisement for a new publishing house. They were looking for debut novelists. The prize was a publishing contract and a $50,000 advance. I stared at the screen. My heart began to pound. I thought of the shoebox full of rejections. I thought of my father's voice. I thought of my mother's sigh. I had a novel in me. It was a story I had been working on for years, a story about a girl who was lost, a girl trying to find her way in a world that didn't see her. It was my story, disguised as fiction. The main character was named Claire, but she had my childhood, my pain, my desperate need to be loved. Writing it was like therapy, like bleeding onto the page. I told Sam about the contest. He was thrilled for me. "This is it, Jess," he said, his eyes shining. "This is your chance. You have to go for it." "I'm scared," I admitted. "What if I fail again?" "Then you fail," he said simply. "But at least you tried. At least you'll know." I spent the next 3 months writing like a woman possessed. I wrote after work, I wrote on weekends, I wrote until my eyes burned and my fingers ached. Sam would bring me dinner, rub my shoulders when they got tight, read passages out loud to hear how they sounded. He was my biggest supporter, my first fan. I poured all my pain, all my loneliness, all my desperate need to be seen into that book. The book was called The Invisible Girl. It told the story of Claire, a young woman growing up in a wealthy suburb, desperate for her parents' approval but never quite able to earn it. Claire loved to draw, but her father told her art was a waste of time. Claire loved to write, but her mother said stories were for children. Claire tried to be what they wanted, but it was never enough. The book followed her through childhood, through the pain of rejection, through the long, lonely years of young adulthood, and finally to her breakthrough, her discovery that the only approval she really needed was her own. Writing it was painful. I would find myself crying at my laptop, overwhelmed by memories I had tried to bury, but it was also healing. Putting my pain on the page, giving it shape and meaning, helped me understand it. Helped me see that I wasn't alone, that my story was part of a larger story, the story of all the invisible girls who had ever been told they weren't enough. I finished it on a Tuesday night. I saved the file, titled it The Invisible Girl, and submitted it to the contest. I didn't tell anyone except Sam. I was too afraid of the rejection. I expected nothing. 6 months passed. Life went on. I kept working at the marketing firm. I kept writing, starting a new story, trying not to think about the contest. Sam's band got a regular gig at a popular club. We were happy together, building a quiet life in our rainy city. Then the email arrived. It was from the publishing house. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely click it open. "Dear Miss Jessica," the email began, "we are thrilled to inform you that your manuscript, The Invisible Girl, has been selected as the winner of our debut novel contest." I read the sentence 3 times. Then I started to scream. I screamed and I cried and I laughed all at the same time. I called Sam, who screamed even louder. He came over immediately, picking up a bottle of champagne on the way. We danced around my tiny apartment, holding my laptop like a precious jewel. For one whole night, I was happy. I was a success. But as the sun came up, the old shadows crept back in. The email sat in my inbox, a glowing testament to my achievement. And all I could think about were my parents. I imagined telling them. I imagined my father's face, his disbelief. I imagined my mother's sigh, her doubt. The thought of it made my stomach clench. They wouldn't believe me. They would find some way to twist it, to make it seem small. They would say it was a fluke. They would say it was a small-time contest. They would say it wasn't a real job. The anger that had been simmering inside me for years began to boil. It was a hot, righteous anger. I had done it. I had actually done it. I had achieved something real, something huge, and they didn't even know I was trying. They had dismissed my dreams so completely that they hadn't even bothered to ask about them. That's when the idea began to form. A plan, a way to finally, once and for all, show them. Not with anger, not with tears, but with the truth. I would reveal my success in a way they could not ignore, could not diminish, could not twist. I would reveal it in the most public way I could imagine. The publishing process took months. I worked with an editor, a brilliant woman named Patricia who understood exactly what I was trying to do. We refined the manuscript, polishing every sentence, making it shine. The cover design came in, a soft watercolor of a lone figure standing at the edge of a crowd. It was perfect. Patricia became more than an editor. She became a mentor. She had been in the publishing world for 30 years and had seen countless writers come and go. "You have something special," she told me. "This book is going to touch a lot of people." "Are you ready for that?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I never thought about people reading it. I just needed to write it." "That's the best reason to write," Patricia said. "But now it's going out into the world. And once it does, it's not yours anymore. It belongs to everyone who reads it. Are you okay with that?" I thought about it. I thought about all the invisible girls out there, all the people who had ever been told they weren't enough. I thought about how much I had needed a book like this when I was young, a book that told me I wasn't alone, that my pain was real, that I mattered. "I'm okay with it," I said. "I hope it helps someone." The book was published 6 months later. The Invisible Girl became a sensation. It started slowly, with a few good reviews in small blogs. Then a major newspaper picked it up, calling it a haunting and powerful debut. Then another. Then it was mentioned on a popular morning talk show. The host held up the book and said, "This book will break your heart and put it back together. You have to read it." I watched the segment from my apartment, my breath caught in my throat. Sam was beside me, holding my hand. My phone started ringing. It was Lily, screaming with joy from New York. It was my old college friends. It was my boss, offering me a promotion if I would please just stay with the company. It was literary agents, asking if I needed representation for my next book. The book was climbing the bestseller lists. It was number 50, then number 30, then number 10. Then, 3 weeks later, it was number 1. I was a best-selling author. My picture was in magazines. I was invited to speak at literary festivals. I did interviews on podcasts and radio shows. My life had changed completely. But still, I hadn't told my parents. I had changed my phone number when I moved, and in the chaos of the last year, I had let the Sunday calls lapse. They didn't know where I was. They didn't know what I had become. For all they knew, I was still in my tiny apartment, failing, and that was exactly how I wanted it. The plan had grown in my mind, taking shape. I was going to go home. I was going to walk through that front door, and I was going to show them, not with a phone call, not with a letter, but in person. I wanted to see their faces. Sam offered to come with me, but I said no. This was something I had to do alone. He kissed me goodbye at the airport and said, "You're amazing, Jess. Don't let them make you forget that." I booked a flight to my hometown, a sterile, wealthy suburb where every lawn was perfect and every house was a monument to success. I rented a car at the airport. As I drove, the streets grew familiar. The trees were taller, but everything else was the same. The same manicured hedges, the same quiet, expensive cars in the driveways. The same heavy feeling settled in my chest, the feeling of being small and not good enough. I parked my rental car down the street from my parents' house. It was a large, colonial-style home, white with black shutters. It looked as unwelcoming as I remembered. I sat in the car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. I had a copy of my book in my bag. It was a special edition, the one with the shiny gold sticker on the front that said number 1 New York Times bestseller. I took a deep breath, got out of the car, and walked up the long, paved driveway. I rang the doorbell. I heard the familiar chime echo inside. Footsteps. The door opened. It was my mother. She looked older. Her hair was more gray, and the lines around her eyes were deeper. She stared at me for a full 5 seconds, her mouth slightly open, as if she were seeing a ghost. "Jessica?" she breathed. "Hello, Mother," I said. My voice was calm, steadier than I felt. She just stared. Then, from inside the house, my father's voice boomed. "Who is it, Margaret?" My father appeared behind my mother. He looked at me, and his face went through a series of expressions. First shock, then confusion, and then, settling into place like an old, comfortable coat, disappointment. "Well, well," he said. "The prodigal daughter returns. Come to ask for money." I felt the old sting, but it was duller now, blunted by the weight of the book in my bag. "No, Father," I said. "I haven't come for money." I stepped past them into the house. It smelled the same, like lemon polish and potpourri, a smell that had always made me feel like a guest in my own home. They followed me into the living room. Everything was the same. The stiff white sofa. The glass coffee table with the expensive art books no one ever read. The portrait of the family from when I was 16, a picture of 4 strangers pretending to be happy. My father stood with his arms crossed. So, he said, you disappear for over a year, you change your number, and now you just show up. What do you want? I want to talk, I said, sitting down on the edge of the white sofa. I want to tell you what I've been doing. My mother sat in a chair across from me, her hands folded in her lap. Her face was a mask of patient suffering, as if she were about to hear another report of failure. We're listening, she said, in a tone that suggested they had heard it all before. I reached into my bag and pulled out the book. I held it up so they could see the cover. The Invisible Girl by Jessica. My father squinted at it. What's that? He asked. You wrote another one of your little stories? Did you pay to have it printed yourself? No, I said calmly. I didn't pay for it. A publisher paid me. I turned the book over and pointed to the gold sticker. It's a #1 bestseller. The silence in the room was absolute. My father stared at the sticker. My mother's hands stopped moving in her lap. My father let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound without humor. A bestseller? He repeated. Don't be ridiculous. Those things are a dime a dozen. Anyone can claim anything. It's not a claim, I said. It's the truth. You can look it up. The New York Times list. It was #1 for 3 weeks. My father's face reddened. This is a joke, he said. You're playing some kind of game. It's not a game, father. My voice was still calm. I wrote a book. I entered it in a contest. I won. It was published. People bought it. A lot of people. It's been translated into 12 languages. I'm going on a book tour in Europe next month. My mother finally spoke, her voice a thin whisper. A book? You wrote a book? Yes, mother. A novel. About a girl who was never good enough for her parents. A girl they called a failure. The words hung in the air, sharp and clear. My father's jaw tightened. You think you can just waltz in here and throw this in our faces? He said, his voice rising. You think this makes you better than us? It doesn't make me better than you, I said. It just makes me not a failure. By any definition, I have a successful career, I have a future, I did it. Without your help, without your belief, I did it alone. My mother looked down at her hands. My father was breathing heavily, his fists clenched at his sides. You always had a flair for the dramatic, he spat. This is just another performance. I stood up. I felt a strange sense of peace. I had said it, I had shown them, and in their faces I saw not pride, not even grudging respect. I saw confusion. I saw a flicker of something that might have been shame. But mostly, I saw 2 people who were completely incapable of changing, of seeing me for who I really was. I didn't come here for your approval, I said quietly. I stopped wanting that a long time ago. I came here to tell you the truth. I came here to close a door. I walked towards the front door. My father followed me, his voice hard. So that's it? You drop your little bomb and then you run away? That's what you've always done, Jessica. You run. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I turned and looked at him, really looked at him. I saw a small, angry man trapped in his own narrow world. No, father, I said. I didn't run. I walked. I walked towards my own life. And I'm not going to look back. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool afternoon air. The door clicked shut behind me, a soft, final sound. I walked down the driveway, got into my rental car, and drove away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. I drove to a small diner on the edge of town, a place I used to go to as a teenager to escape the silence of my house. It was called Mel's Diner, a tiny place with red vinyl booths and a jukebox that still played old songs. I ordered a cup of coffee and sat in a booth by the window, watching the cars go by. I thought about my childhood, about all the times I had sat in this very booth, nursing a soda and dreaming of escape. And now I had escaped. I had built a life far from here, and it felt good. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it. It was from my mother. Jessica, it read, we saw the book. We looked it up. Is it really about us? I stared at the message for a long time. I thought about my mother, sitting in that sterile living room, her hands folded, finally asking a question that mattered. I thought about my father, his anger, his inability to see past his own pride. I typed a reply. Read it and find out. Then I put my phone away. I finished my coffee and walked out of the diner. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I got back in my car and headed for the airport. I had a life to live, a book tour to prepare for, stories to write. I was no longer the invisible girl. I was finally, completely myself. The flight back home was quiet. I sat by the window, watching the lights of the cities below, thinking about everything that had happened. I felt lighter somehow, as if a weight I had been carrying my whole life had been lifted. I hadn't gotten the apology I wanted, not really. But I had gotten something better. I had gotten closure. Sam was waiting for me at the airport with flowers. He hugged me tight and said, "How did it go?" I thought for a moment and then said, "It went. That's enough." The book continued to sell. The offers kept coming. Movie rights, foreign deals, speaking engagements. I built a new life, a life filled with people who saw me, who valued me for my mind and my talent. I bought a small house by the ocean, a place where I could write with the sound of the waves in the background. It was a far cry from the sterile perfection of my childhood home. It was warm and cozy, filled with books and art and the smell of the sea. Sam moved in with me. We built a life together, a good life. Weeks turned into months. I never heard from my father, but my mother started sending me letters. Long, handwritten letters. They were awkward at first, full of stilted sentences and obvious effort. She wrote about the garden, about the neighbors, about the book club she had joined that was reading The Invisible Girl. She wrote about how strange it was to hear her daughter's words discussed by strangers. She wrote about how proud she was, though the words seemed to cost her something to write. I read the letters. I didn't reply at first. The old hurt was too deep, but I kept them in a drawer in my desk. The letters were a balm, a small one, but a balm nonetheless. One day, a letter arrived that was different. It was thicker than the others. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. It was old, faded. It was a picture of me as a little girl, maybe 4 years old. I was sitting at a small table, a paintbrush in my hand, a huge smile on my face. I was covered in paint. Behind me, standing with a dish towel, was my mother, and she was laughing. Really laughing, her head thrown back, her eyes shining. On the back of the photo, in my mother's handwriting, it said, "My little artist, 1987. I stared at the photo. I didn't remember this day. I didn't remember my mother ever laughing like that. But here it was, proof that it had happened. Proof that somewhere, deep down, my mother had once seen me, had once been proud. A few days later, I picked up the phone and dialed the old number. My mother answered. "Hello? Hi, Mom," I said. "It's me." There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath. "Jessica? Oh, Jessica, hello." "I got your letter," I said. "The one with the photo. Did you?" Her voice was thick. "I've been keeping that picture for a long time. I found it in a box in the attic. I wanted you to know that I remember. I remember that girl." I felt a lump form in my throat. "I remember her too," I said. "I've been trying to find her again." "You did," she said softly. "You found her, in your book. When I read it, I saw her. I saw you, and I saw us. And I am so, so sorry." The words hung in the air. They were the words I had waited my whole life to hear. And now that they were here, they didn't erase the past. They didn't make the pain go away. But they opened a door. A small door. A door to something new. "I'm sorry too," I said, "for staying away for so long. We talked for an hour. We talked about the book. We talked about the ocean house. We talked about small things, everyday things. My mother told me that my father had seen the book too, that he had picked it up one night and read the first few pages, then put it down and never mentioned it again. He doesn't know how to handle it," she said. "He doesn't know how to handle you. You've become something he can't understand." I thought about that. I thought about my father, a man who measured success in dollars and status, who couldn't see the value in art because you couldn't put a price on it. I felt a flicker of pity for him, for the smallness of his world. It was a start. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better. It was a real beginning. Over the next year, my mother and I continued to talk. The calls became weekly, then twice a week. She came to visit me at the ocean house. It was awkward at first, two women who were practically strangers trying to find a way to be mother and daughter. But we walked on the beach together. We cooked meals together. We talked about the past, the good parts and the bad. Slowly, carefully, we began to build something new. During one visit, my mother opened up about her own life. She told me about her childhood, about her own parents who were strict and demanding. She told me about dreams she had given up, a love of painting she had abandoned because it wasn't practical. "I see myself in you," she said. "And I see all the ways I failed you because I failed myself first. I'm not making excuses. I'm just trying to understand." I listened. I didn't forgive everything, not yet, but I understood a little more. And understanding was the first step. My father never called. I learned that some people are just too proud, too rigid to change. I made peace with that. I had my mother, I had my work. I had Sam, I had myself. The second book came out a year later. It was even more successful than the first. I was becoming a name, a voice in the literary world. I did readings in cities across the country. I signed books for long lines of readers who told me how much my stories meant to them. I was no longer invisible. I was seen. One night, after a reading in Chicago, a man approached me at the signing table. He was older, with gray hair and kind eyes. He held a copy of The Invisible Girl. "I know this might sound strange," he said, "but I feel like I know you. I feel like this book was written for me." I smiled. "That's the best compliment a writer can get," I said. He nodded. "My daughter," he said, his voice catching. "She was an artist, too. She passed away 5 years ago, cancer. Reading your book, it felt like she was talking to me again. Like I could hear her voice. I felt tears prick my eyes. I reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm so sorry," I said, "but I'm glad my book could bring her back to you, even for a little while." He squeezed my hand and smiled. "You have a gift," he said. "Don't ever stop." After he walked away, I sat for a long time, thinking about what he had said. I thought about all the people who had read my book, who had found comfort or connection in my words. I thought about the power of stories, the way they could reach across distances, across differences, even across death. And I thought about my own story, the long road I had traveled from that unhappy childhood to this moment, sitting at a table in a crowded bookstore, touching people's lives with my words. I thought about my parents, about the word failure that had haunted me for so long. I realized now that failure wasn't a thing you were. It was a thing you did, a moment, a setback. It wasn't an identity. I had failed many times. I had been rejected over and over, but I had kept going, I had kept writing. And that persistence, that stubborn refusal to give up, that was the opposite of failure. That was success. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sam. "How'd it go?" It read. I typed back. It went, "Come home soon. I miss you." I packed up my things and walked out of the bookstore into the cool Chicago night. The city was alive with lights and sounds, people hurrying past, cars honking, music drifting from a nearby bar. I felt alive too, more alive than I had ever felt. I had a home to go to, a person who loved me, a career I had built with my own 2 hands. I had everything I had ever wanted. And so, sitting in my home by the ocean months later, the sound of the waves a constant comfort, I thought about my story. It was a story of failure, yes, but it was also a story of success. It was a story of pain, but also of healing. It was a story of a girl who was told she was nothing, and who became everything she ever wanted to be. My mother came to visit often now. We had developed a rhythm, a way of being together that was comfortable and real. We would walk on the beach, collecting shells, talking about books and life and the small things that filled our days. She had changed. The hard edges had softened. She talked about her own childhood, about her own dreams that had been pushed aside, about the pressure she had felt to be perfect, to raise perfect children. "I see now," she said one day, watching the waves. "I see that I was passing on a pain that was given to me. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand." I took her hand. "We're here now," I said. "That's what matters." My father never did reach out. I heard through my mother that he had retired, that he spent his days playing golf and reading financial reports, that he never mentioned my name. It hurt, a little. It would probably always hurt, a small ache in a corner of my heart. But it didn't define me. It didn't control me. I had let go of needing his approval, and in letting go, I had found freedom. Sam proposed on the beach at sunset. He got down on one knee in the sand, the waves crashing behind him, and asked me to marry him. I said yes, of course, crying and laughing at the same time. We were married 6 months later, a small ceremony with friends and family. My mother was there, crying happy tears. My father was not. I didn't let it ruin my day. I danced with Sam, ate cake, laughed with my friends. I was happy, truly, deeply happy. The years passed. I wrote more books. I won awards. I taught writing workshops at the college level, helping young writers find their voices. Sam and I had a daughter, a little girl with bright eyes and a curious mind. We named her Lily, after my best friend. I looked at my daughter sometimes and saw myself, saw the same spark, the same creativity. And I made a promise. I would never call her a failure. I would never make her feel small. I would nurture that spark, protect it, help it grow. One day, when Lily was about 7, she came home from school with a painting. It was a mess of colors, a wild explosion of red and blue and yellow. "Look, Mommy," she shouted. "I made this for you. It's our family at the beach." I looked at the painting. I saw 3 figures, stick people really, holding hands under a big yellow sun. It was beautiful. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I hugged her tight and said, "It's perfect, baby. It's absolutely perfect." I hung the painting on the refrigerator, right in the center, where I would see it every day. And every time I looked at it, I thought about the little girl I used to be, the one who loved to draw, the one who was told her art didn't matter. I thought about how far I had come, how much I had healed. And I felt grateful. Grateful for the pain that had shaped me, for the struggles that had made me strong, for the love that had saved me. As Lily grew older, I made sure to encourage her creativity. I filled the house with art supplies. I read her stories every night. I took her to museums and concerts and plays. I told her every single day that she was loved, that she was enough, that she could be anything she wanted to be. It was the childhood I had always wanted, and I was giving it to my daughter. Lily was 10 when she wrote her first story. It was a little tale about a girl who could talk to animals. She brought it to me with shining eyes. "Read it, Mommy. Tell me if it's good." I read it carefully. It was charming, full of imagination and heart. "Lily," I said, "this is wonderful. You have a real gift." She beamed. "Really? Really," I said. "And I'm not just saying that because I'm your mom, I'm saying it because it's true." She hugged me tight. "I want to be a writer like you when I grow up," she said. I felt tears prick my eyes. "You can be anything you want to be," I said. "And I'll be right here, cheering you on every step of the way." My mother passed away peacefully when Lily was 10. I was by her side, holding her hand. In her final days, we talked about everything, about the past and the present, about regrets and forgiveness. Her last words were, "I'm so proud of you, Jessica, so proud." I kissed her forehead and said, "I know, Mom, I know." At the funeral, I gave a eulogy. I talked about my mother's complexity, her flaws and her strengths, her journey from judgment to understanding. I talked about the letters, the photo, the slow rebuilding of our relationship. I talked about love and how it could grow even in the most unlikely places. People cried. I cried too. But I also smiled, remembering the good moments, the laughter, the beach walks, the late-night phone calls. After the funeral, an old man approached me. It took me a moment to recognize him. It was my father. He looked old and frail, smaller than I remembered. He stood before me, his hands in his pockets, his eyes on the ground. "Jessica," he said, "I'm sorry about your mother." "Thank you," I said. There was a long pause. "I read your books," he said quietly, "all of them. I never told you, but I did." I felt a shock run through me. "You did." He nodded, still not meeting my eyes. "I didn't understand them at first. I didn't understand you. But your mother, she kept putting them in my study. She kept leaving them where I would see them. Eventually, I picked one up. And I kept reading." He looked up then, his eyes wet. "You're talented," he said. "You always were. I just couldn't see it. I couldn't see past my own ideas of what success should look like. I was wrong." The words hung in the air between us. I felt tears prick my eyes. It was the apology I had waited for my whole life. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't everything. But it was something. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." He nodded. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know." He turned to go, then stopped. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. It was the same one my mother had sent, the one of little me painting, my mother laughing behind me. "I've carried this with me for years," he said. "I look at it sometimes, to remind myself." He handed it to me. "You keep it now." I took the photo. I looked at it, at the little girl with the paintbrush, at the mother laughing in the background. Then I looked at my father, this old, broken man who had caused me so much pain, who was finally at the end of everything, trying to make it right. I stepped forward and hugged him. He stiffened at first, then relaxed, his arms coming up to hold me. We stood like that for a long moment, father and daughter, finally finding a way to each other. When we pulled apart, he wiped his eyes. "I should go," he said. "But maybe, if you're willing, we could talk sometime." "I'd like that," I said. He walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I watched him go, the photo clutched in my hand. I felt a complex mix of emotions, sadness and relief, old pain and new hope. But underneath it all, I felt peace. I went home that night to my house by the ocean. Sam was there, and Lily, and the dog, and the cat, and all the warmth and chaos of a real family. I sat on the couch, Lily curled up beside me, and told them about the funeral, about my father, about the photo. Lily looked at the picture. "Is that you, Mommy?" she asked. "When you were little?" "Yes, baby," I said. "That's me. You look happy," Lily said. I thought about it. In the photo, little me was covered in paint, grinning at my mother, full of joy and creativity. I had been happy in that moment. The happiness had gotten buried under years of criticism and pain, but it had always been there, waiting to be found again. "I was happy," I said, "and I am happy now." I kissed her head and looked out the window at the ocean, vast and eternal, stretching to the horizon. I thought about my journey, about all the people who had helped me along the way, about the strength I had found within myself. I thought about the word failure, how it had lost its power over me. I was not a failure. I never had been. I was a woman who had faced her demons and overcome them. I was a writer who had found my voice. I was a mother who would break the cycle of pain. I was a daughter who had found forgiveness. The next few years brought more changes. My third book was adapted into a film. I flew to Los Angeles for the premiere, walking a red carpet for the first time in my life. Sam was beside me, looking handsome in a tuxedo. Lily was at home with a babysitter, but she had made me promise to bring her a souvenir. I laughed and promised I would. The film was beautiful. Watching my characters come to life on screen was surreal, like stepping into a dream. Afterward, at the party, I was surrounded by actors and directors and producers, all wanting to talk to me, to praise my work. It was overwhelming. I slipped away to a quiet corner and called home. Lily answered, sleepy but excited. "Mommy, did you see the movie? Was it good?" "It was amazing, baby," I said. "I'll tell you all about it when I get home." "I'm proud of you, Mommy," Lily said. I felt tears prick my eyes. "I'm proud of you too, baby. Now go back to sleep. I love you." "Love you too, Mommy." I hung up and stood there for a moment, looking out at the glittering lights of Los Angeles. I thought about how far I had come, from that lonely little girl in the suburbs to this moment, standing in the middle of my own dream. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been fair. But it had been my journey, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Sam found me a few minutes later. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, smiling. "I'm more than okay," I said. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." He put his arm around me. "Yeah," he said. "You are." We stood together, watching the party swirl around us, and I felt a deep, abiding gratitude. For Sam, for Lily, for my mother's late but real love, even for my father's grudging acknowledgement. For the readers who had embraced my books, for the teachers who had believed in me, for the friends who had supported me. For myself, for the strength I had found when I thought I had none. The years continued to pass. Lily grew up, became a teenager, then a young woman. She did become a writer, just as she had always wanted. Her first book was published when she was 25. I was at the launch party, beaming with pride. I signed copies of my own books alongside my daughter, a mother-daughter duo that made the local news. Lily's book was dedicated to me. For my mother, who taught me that stories matter, and that I matter too. I cried when I read it. I cried happy tears, the kind that come from a full heart. My father passed away a few years later. I went to the funeral, stood in the back, and listened as people talked about his success, his career, his dedication to his work. No one mentioned his family. No one mentioned his daughter. I didn't mind. I had made my peace with him, and that was enough. After the service, an old woman approached me. She was tiny and frail, with white hair and bright eyes. "You're Jessica, aren't you?" she said, "the writer." "Yes," I said. The woman smiled. "I was your father's secretary for 30 years, she said. He talked about you, not often, but sometimes. He kept your books in his office. He would read them when he thought no one was looking." I felt a lump form in my throat. "He did," the woman nodded. "He was proud of you. He just didn't know how to say it. Men of his generation, they weren't good at that sort of thing." I thanked her and walked away, thinking about my father, about all the years of silence, about this small revelation at the very end. It didn't change everything, but it added a new layer to the story, a new piece of the puzzle. He had been proud, he just hadn't been able to show it. I thought about the photo, the one of me as a little girl, painting, the one he had carried with him for years. Maybe, in his own way, he had been trying to hold on to me, to the memory of who I was before everything went wrong. Maybe he had loved me all along. He just hadn't known how. And so, sitting in my home by the ocean, the sound of the waves a constant comfort, I thought about my story. It was a story of failure, yes, but it was also a story of success. It was a story of pain, but also of healing. It was a story of a girl who was told she was nothing, and who became everything she ever wanted to be. I looked around at my life. At the books on the shelves, my books, in dozens of languages. At the photos on the walls, of Sam and Lily and friends and travels. At the painting on the refrigerator, the one Lily had made when she was 7, now faded but still precious. At the worn photograph of a little girl with a paintbrush, my mother laughing behind her. I was that little girl. I was that laughing mother. I was the woman who had written myself into existence, who had turned my pain into art, who had broken the cycle and built something new. I was the invisible girl, finally seen, not just by the world but by myself. And that, I realized, was the greatest success of all.